Hi, this is Chris from the Hay River Berry Farm, and this is our orchard number 3, which is a Haskap orchard. And this I've had in this video, or I've made videos of this orchard in the past. These are Maxine Thompson's varieties, and down at the far end, you can't, it's in the shadow area, is the Boreal series, the latest from the University of Saskatchewan. So this is really just an update on how this orchard is progressing, and as you can see, it's looking actually very good. Really nice plant growth. We're just getting into the main bloom, and it's looking quite good so far. So what's interesting is I wanted to mention this is today is a quite a warm day for May, and it's May the 14th today. So typically for pollination, you can see that we have 3 beehives here. The 4th beehive is empty. Keep it out for a swarm trap. These are our honeybees, and you can see 2 of the hives are so far just waking up and starting to get active. And right on their doorstep are Haskap plants with flowers, and not a single honeybee in them. However, there are some queen bumblebees floating around, and we see them pollinating our Haskap plants far more often than we do our honeybees, actually. A lot of growers in Nova Scotia, they buy bumblebee quads and bring them in. For us, we have enough bumblebee local population that we've never had to bring in any bumblebees. They have a lot of natural habitat here with the forests all the way around, and typically we'll see usually quite high queen activity, but they may be raising their workers at the moment. This is the time of year where the bumblebee queens are normally out and around, and they set up their hives and they're raising their workers. And once the workers hatch out, then you'll start to see a lot more bumblebees floating around. So there's a couple, I can see one over here working away. So the queens are great. They'll do up to 8,000 flowers a day. They're the best pollinator that we have. So in this orchard, you can see I'm making some changes. The posts, I'm going to talk about our bird netting posts. So originally we've always used a 4x4 piece of hemlock and a super spike. Because of the pandemic and the shutdowns in China, with super spikes all come from China, we can't get any more super spikes at the moment. They're also, the cost of them has gone up quite a bit. And what I find with the super spikes is they eventually rust and break. They're just cheap steel, and you have to replace them anyway. And you can see here on the end, of course, it's going to lean in because we don't have a cross or an angled support. So I think the easiest thing for me to do in this case, and the cheapest, was to replace it with this galvanized post and a piece of 8 or 6 foot T-bar just as an angle, and that stays in there no problem. We just put a bolt across it to hold it in place. You can see it there. That'll keep it from sliding up if there's any pressure put on it. And this is good for 25 years probably, maybe longer. The only thing I don't know is how long these plastic pieces last. I mean, they're UV treated, of course. I guess we'll find out how brittle they get over time. And that would probably be the only piece that we'd have to replace. Fortunately, they're not really expensive. The big question is in 15 years when I need some, do they still exist? So if they don't, I'll have to come up with a different plan. So I'm just gonna walk down. You can see the first 2 rows, they were the first ones we planted. We did not deer fence when we first put them in, and the deer were chewing on them every year. We've since fenced then. These next rows were planted in subsequent years, and you can see here the first 4 rows, they look pretty good. We harvested on them last year. They yielded about 3/4 of a pound per plant. This year they should produce, they grew a lot last year, so I'm expecting them to produce a pound, maybe a pound and a half if I'm lucky. The berries on these bushes are really large. Well, I wouldn't say really large, they're quite large, very juicy, but with a thin skin. So what we found is if you drop them from a height, they on a piece of aluminum, for example, our waxwing harvester, then sometimes the skin would split, and that's not ideal. But they're really good fresh eating, and we did harvest a lot by hand for fresh Haskap sales. For U-pick, very good plant for U-pick for sure. We did freeze them right away, even though if the berry did split when it came in, when it landed in the pan, and it was fine. It still worked out for frozen without too much trouble. They make really good juice. And this is the same. These are, again, Maxine Thompson's varieties, subsequent years of planting. And then finally we're down to the Boreal series, which are still very small. These are only a couple this row here was planted a year and a half ago. So we're not going to harvest from them this year, so we won't put any bird netting up. Black flies, I'm inhaling a couple black flies as I'm talking. And same with the very far row, we just did that one last year, so they will get bird netting next year, probably, if just depending on how much time I have to put them on. We'll probably harvest this row, depending on its growth, next year. We're going to renew the wood shavings and give them a lot of good, generous amount of compost as well. These guys we didn't harvest last year. We're going to harvest them this year. They'll probably produce a half a pound a plant, maybe something like that. We're going to try and max out the amount of berries we get this year. In the rows, you'll see we have some clover, and you'll see here really small sprouts here. That's actually from frost seeding. So what we've done is in March, when we get a bit of a frost, and how the ground puffs up a little bit, we come out with clover seed, and then we just walk through and throw the clover seed down, and of course it drops down in between all the little cracks in the soil. And then come springtime, it's gonna sprout up for us, hopefully. So what we want to do is just have a cover crop of white clover down the middle. You can see here, that's all fresh seeded clover seed that I threw down in March, all coming up. The whole idea is hopefully we can reduce the amount of mowing that we have to do in this orchard. It's not too bad. I usually come through about 3 or 4 times a year, and that's about it. Just use a 3-point hitch bush hog actually on my small 33 horsepower tractor, and it knocks everything down pretty good. You can see the bark or the wood shavings have worked to keep the weeds down. We don't have to do a lot of weeding. We see any big weeds, we just pull them out as we go. It's maybe spent 4 or 5 hours on this entire orchard weeding it in the last 4 years. But something like that, I need to bring a shovel with me and just dig them out and get rid of them. But generally speaking, yeah, very little weeding that needs to be done in this orchard. Especially now when the plants get larger, it's not even an issue. These wood shavings were renewed last year, so I get about probably 3 or 4 years before I need to redo them. And it's fairly inexpensive for us to do it. So that's it. This is just a little over 1 acre, this orchard. It's not a really big orchard, but we're hoping that it's going to produce a lot, probably more than what we can handle, actually. All right, that's it.